All right, thanks for joining me today, Thomas and Kunti. Hi, I'm Charity Jordan, the Prevention Education Coordinator at Harmony House, and I'm joined by Thomas Bartolotta. He is the Community Organizer for Engage on the MSU campus, and Kunti Bentley, who is the Project Director for Project Heal for MSU and OTC. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
So we're having this conversation because I know that you two are doing lots of great work here in the Springfield area in regards to interpersonal violence. It's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so I thought this would be a good time to kind of have a conversation around that topic. But before we get into that conversation piece, I'd love for you both to share a little bit more about your organizations. Kunti, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit more about Project Heal and the work that you're involved in at FSU.
Sure. Charity Project Heal is a grant-funded program. We receive funding from the Office on Violence Against Women through through the U.S. Department of Justice. We are a consortia, project. So we operate over two campuses here in Springfield, so OTC and also Missouri State University. So we focus on taking a community-wide approach to reducing interpersonal violence, dating violence, stalking on both campuses.
Awesome, thank you. Thomas, tell us a little bit about the Engage and what that is and what you do in your role.
Yeah, so Engage is also a grant-funded program. We are located here at Missouri State University. My job is to train students and faculty, staff, community members on how to identify signs of abuse through different topics that we look at, different scenarios, one of which is sexual assault, interpersonal violence, stalking, and how to engage in those situations so that you can help the person who's being abused.
Awesome. I know I've visited both of programs with both of you, and I know they are really powerful, the information that you are getting out there. I do want to talk about, though, what you each are seeing and the work that you do in your respective roles on campus there, especially as it relates to sexual violence. Can either of you speak to that? Like, what are some of the needs that you're seeing in students, or what are they experiencing here in the community or on campus?
Well, I'll share something briefly. Charity, we know that according to RAIN, it's a website that focuses on tracking statistics of community members, persons who are impacted by sexual violence. 13% of all college students will experience some form of sexual violence. The unfortunate fact behind that statistic is that 96% of all on-campus rapes go unreported. So sexual violence is something that's happening at an incredibly high rate, although it's being underreported. So we recognize that college students are especially vulnerable to these types of crimes. I mentioned Project Heal takes a community-wide approach. That means we work with many off-campus departments and organizations and agencies, but the main goal is to create a safer environment for our students on campus. And I know Thomas works towards that goal as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to mention, just to highlight and outline the prevalence of those crimes experienced by college students. One thing that's important to mention is that we also recognize that underrepresented students and students from communities, who may be experiencing, who may be have disabilities, or who may come from an underrepresented type of community of people, they also experience those crimes, but at much higher rates. One more quick thing I want to add is that we all know that sexual violence does not discriminate, but we work within a society where prevention education programs and response to those crimes do discriminate. So I know that's something that we try to be mindful about as we work to educate our college campuses and also provide victim services for all.
I'm curious if you have noticed, we're kind of in a post Me Too era. So I feel like the awareness of sexual harassment and some of those things is much higher. Like, I hear it being talked about a lot more. Has that impacted the numbers at all as far as what you're seeing, Kunti? Like, are we seeing more things being reported because people feel safer to report? Or are those numbers going down at all because there's more awareness? What are you noticing?
Charity, that's a great question, and I wish I had a better answer for you. We track statistics, and we have not seen the numbers move greatly on that spectrum over the last several years. I think a lot of things go into that. One of the things that we have to work with, of course, are the regulations that trickle down from the U.S. Department of Justice and the White House and the Title IX laws, things like that. Why they don't mean to, sometimes they can prohibit a student from accessing services and reporting those types of crimes when they occur. Another piece of that puzzle is that while I think you're right that awareness has grown, we still live in a society where there's a pervasive sort of idea that sexual violence is just going to happen, whether or not we do anything to stop it. So we might as well make sure we provide services to community members and students when it does happen. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle when we think about, what does it really look like to take action in the prevention area, which is the area you work in too. So I know that you understand this fact and you believe that to be true. So that's a great question. Again, to underscore, we haven't seen those numbers change. We still are looking at underreported cases of sexual violence. So we're working to change that. We'd like to create a culture of reporting so that students feel supported, so that students and survivors feel believed. So I know we're all working towards that.
Thomas, can you speak a little bit to what you're seeing in your role? And you have a slightly different piece of this puzzle because you talk a lot about kind of bystander intervention and how folks can respond and maybe intervene. What are you seeing in your work?
Yeah, with my work, so this program has been on campus for 2 semesters now, and we're seeing a lot of students wanting to help and not knowing how to help. So we are getting a lot of students who they want that information, they are aware that it's something that occurs, and their biggest concern is, what if I don't know what I'm doing? What if I don't know what I'm seeing? And how do I react to that? So what we're seeing is a lot of students coming into this program, it being focused on knowing your obstacles, knowing what can get in the way from you helping other people, and finding ways around those obstacles or finding other options. Giving those options to students is what's allowing a lot of them more confidence in reacting or feeling like they are trained in something that they can go forward and they can actually prevent. So we are seeing a lot of SGA, our Student Government Association, they're promoting a lot of the program. They're wanting to get it out as much as possible. We're getting instructors wanting us to show up in classes to train students as well. So students are they're aware of this program and they're wanting ways in which we can implement it and work it into getting new students trained as they're coming into campus to help prevent as soon as possible.
I'm wondering, Thomas, if you have any anecdotes, any stories that you can share of maybe students that you've worked with who've come back and said, I've had a chance to use this, and like they've been able to actually use that info and help someone. Have you had that experience?
I do, not necessarily in a sexual assault situation. We also work in bias and discrimination fields and things of that, and we look at microaggressions and we look at other areas in which there could be hard conversations to have with people, sometimes with your friends, where they're doing something that isn't okay, and how to approach that situation. These tactics that we show in our program that are the same tactics that we use when we want to prevent sexual assault and interpersonal violence, having these harder conversations with people. I have had a student come up to me and talk to me about, hey, I was able to have this conversation with, a fraternity friend of theirs who did something that they weren't proud of, or they weren't, they didn't think of as well sought out. So I am getting some feedback. It's not as much as I would like, but at the same time, I'm not out requesting any of this feedback. I'm not out having students share their stories. A lot of this is really just what they're comfortable with, and sometimes students are more comfortable just doing stuff on their own and not trying to share and make it more public. Some of it's just private conversations that they're having, but at least they're having them, and at least they're feeling more comfortable having them. and that they're happening on campus.
Yeah, that's been my experience too when I do bystander intervention. Usually I get a feel for the room at first. How comfortable do people feel intervening? And usually um, most folks in the room will say they don't feel very comfortable because they're not sure of what to say or what to do. But by the end, they do feel like, yes, I could do this. They have lots of options. And so, yeah, I think people probably are doing this a lot more. And that's so awesome, Thomas, that you're providing those resources. I would love to hear from both of you on, since you're on college campuses and we're a college town, what do you think the community could do to support the work that you're doing on campus? Because especially you talked about students feeling safe to report. Is there anything that the community can do to help that?
Yes, I would like to see our efforts regarding connecting different resources. I'd like to see those efforts strengthen. I'd like to continue to partner with off-campus agencies who may not have a focus in providing victim services per se, but may be able to provide support in some other holistic way when it comes to protecting students. I'd like to do more with law enforcement in our community. I know there are some great folks who work in that field, but it would be nice to, really work intentionally toward creating opportunities for those folks to step forward. I would like to continue to work towards changing the misperception that you can't prevent. I would like to work towards all these leaders in our community to change the perception, like I said, that sexual violence is something that just can't be stopped. Because I believe that it can be, but it's really going to take the entire community working together to do that.
Thomas, do you have any thoughts? Is there some way that the community could support the work that you're doing?
It's interesting. Support the work that we're doing. I am by myself. I am a lone person in this program, but part of this program, it allows me to train others to give out our program training. So I'm allowed to give training opportunities to other students and other faculty, other staff, even community members. A lot of these trainings happen on Missouri State campus, but the main part of this training is that it's supposed to build a stronger community. It's supposed to get people to prevent outside of campus, not just on campus. So we're hoping to, get people trained so if they're out at a bar and downtown, if they're, enjoying the nightlife and they see something occur, that they still have that confidence to step in and help where they can. So seeing our community members, wanting to be involved in that same process and realizing, our training program to become a facilitator, it's a 90-minute training online. If you're a student, you can do it with an extra 90 minutes for peer educator training. But other than that, you get to see the trainings, you get to go facilitate those trainings and train other people within our community. It's a network that we're hoping to build.
Thomas, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Charity. I just want to say I love that idea, and I would love nothing more than to see Engage really spread throughout our entire community. I think what Thomas was saying about his ability and the ability of the program to train community members, to train other students, to train faculty and staff at all kinds of organizations here in Springfield, from Community Partnership of the Ozarks to the Glow Center to Grupo Latino Americano. All these places have leaders and individuals who are, I think, willing and eager to take action to help their own, social circles of friends. I think that, yes, I would love to be a part of and would love to work towards supporting Engage as they grow, not only to educate folks on our campus, but like Thomas was saying, off campus as well. We all know that while campus is situated in the city, it's not a totally isolated community. We are all sharing this community together.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting ready to wrap up, but Thomas, I would love to get your perspective as a man, and you're one of the few men in this area who is working in this field. I wonder if you could speak to why men should why men should even care about this, because I think the perception is that this is a woman's issue, but can you speak to why this isn't just a woman's issue, and maybe how men can even be allies in preventing violence?
Yeah. As Kunti mentioned earlier about the idea that sexual assault, interpersonal violence, it doesn't discriminate. It happens to anyone and everyone around. And men, uh, it statistically shows that men are more likely to become perpetrators of these acts of violence. Um, Knowing that ahead of time, finding out what you're doing that you may not even know that you're doing. A lot of the issues that we see are a lack of education, a lack of knowledge in these fields. We see a lot of men who may not have the best relationships growing up with their family and their models, and then they react those and they show those, not realizing what they're doing is harmful and playing into a stereotype of masculinity that they grew up with or grew around, especially in media. Acknowledging that there's other ways to learn and to educate and to help others. But when it comes to men, we see there's a lot of men who suffer themselves from sexual assault, suffer themselves from domestic violence, and are um, shown time and time again that they shouldn't speak out about those things, that it's that they need to hold that inside. They need to just tough it out, essentially. I'm hopeful that my work here brings to light that there are men out there that are suffering, who can seek help, who can be a change to others, and that it just takes one person, any gender, any person, to step up and to speak out to make a change. And I'm just doing the best I can in this field, and hoping that other people can do the best that they can, and just move forward in that manner.
Yeah, that's, see myself as just throwing like a stone in the pond and creating ripples that hopefully will go far beyond me. And yeah, that's all we can do, is the best we can. Kunti, final comments from you. You talked about how sexual violence is preventable. If you could, briefly talk about maybe one or two ways that community members can do to help prevent sexual violence or interpersonal violence.
That's a great question, Charity. Thanks for asking that. I think one of the biggest things we can do is to engage in discussions with our family members and our friends, our classmates, about consent. And the bigger picture is that this idea that consent needs to be an ongoing conversation. It's not, I'd like to sort of dispel the myth that consent is this thing where you ask permission to gain access to somebody's body physically, but the consent is more of a holistic type of perspective, and the ways that we communicate with each other regarding our needs, whether that's friendship, intimate relations, our family relationships. That all really matters. So one thing we can do, I think, is to definitely find ways to have those conversations. They may be difficult. I think another way is to be a bystander. I know Thomas's program focuses on the bystander prevention type tools. And I think the sort of golden rule of, if you see something, say something, it applies. If you feel that something is not right and you're watching maybe some friends of yours or family members find themselves in a situation that feels unhealthy or harmful to you, hopefully you can find a trusted person to share that with, and maybe help provide some resources. Find a time when maybe something, when there's not a conversation going on between those two people, but maybe when you're on your own, check in, I think, is an important tool we can use in helping our community have conversations and heal, and perhaps get out of a harmful relationship or situation. Check in with your friends, again, trusting your gut and really listening to yourself when you feel like maybe the situation is not so great, something just feels off. So trust yourself, talk about consent, be an active bystander, check in with your friends, and check in with yourself. If you feel like something is not right with a relationship and you're hurting and you don't know why, trust yourself to recognize that, yeah, maybe something's not right. We have resources on and off campus within this community to help you work through a myriad of those types of situations. So
I love the way you both kind of summed up this conversation. that we can all be involved. It's not something just for one demographic to do, but we can all be involved in helping to end that violence. And we can all do something, even if it's small. Thomas and Kunti, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation.
Thank you.